Couch of 2022. We're live. Count up. What does the DJ Chark signing mean for Amon-Ra St. Brown and the rest of the Lions offense? That and more this week on the couch. JJ Zachariason, you have things to say. That's why I brought you here. Say some things about the DJ Chark signing.
Look, all right. So first off, it's good to talk to you.
Always.
I've missed you. Yeah, you got some Yinzer vibes. Yeah. So it's good to talk to you. But yeah, I mean, look, I think the DJ Chark signing, especially financially, made a lot of sense for Detroit. I mean, they don't have anyone that can really stretch the field. I know that you can look at like what Jared Goff did last year and say, oh, he didn't throw the ball down the field. Well, they didn't really have many weapons that could stretch the field very well and have that like elite presence on the perimeter in terms of speed, right? And we know that Chark at least has that athleticism. Is DJ Chark a great wide receiver? I think that the jury's still out, but at the same time, he's at least a good presence for them on the outside. And, he's also, if you look at the financials, it's a great deal for them. It's a 1-year prove it kind of deal. And that's great. I've seen a lot of Twitter feedback on not only this signing, but also just like what's gone on this offseason with Amon-Ra St. Brown. It seems like him and like Gabe Davis are the two guys that especially the dynasty folks are going to be arguing about for months and months because of how they obviously ended their seasons. But also, they're not prospects who entered the league, as these like day 1, day 2 guys. And so as a result, a lot of people are just like, we got to just avoid these guys because we know that, day 3 picks don't hit at a very high rate. But you can look at both of those profiles. Let's just focus on Amon-Ra because obviously, DJ Chark signing there is the topic here. You have to ask yourself, a lot of the argument against Amon-Ra St. Brown is that he only really produced and was seeing this like 30+% target share without TJ Hawkinson, without DeAndre Swift. But you have to ask yourself, why was he able to do that? Why was Amon-Ra St. Brown able to see a 30% target share consistently week over week for like a 5-week stretch when there are plenty of other times and opportunities for young wide receivers to grab hold of a wide receiving group and a pass catching group and see high target shares, but they don't. And it's because at the end of the day, targets are a result of talent and getting open and being good at football, right? This is not the same thing as a running back stepping in for an injured running back and just being the default for a team to get touches. Like, yes, we want running back talent to win out, and running back talent, rational coaching, running back talent, we hope wins out at the end of the day. But at the same time, we know that wide receiver talent, targets, and volume at wide receiver, that is a talent-driven statistic. And so you can't sit there and say that Amon-Ra St. Brown only produced because TJ Hawkinson and DeAndre Swift were out. And then here's the other thing with this Amon-Ra St. Brown stuff and this TJ Hawkinson stuff. Why are we consistently giving TJ Hawkinson such a pass for being this elite pass catcher in the league when Amon-Ra St. Brown in a 5-week stretch, in a month and a half stretch, proved more as a pass catcher in his first season in the league than TJ Hawkinson has throughout his entire career in the league? I mean, I understand that we like TJ Hawkinson from a athleticism standpoint, and obviously he was a great prospect entering the league. And I'm not saying that Hawkinson's not a top 10 tight end, but at the same time, it just seems like everyone is writing off Amon-Ra St. Brown because of TJ Hawkinson, because of DeAndre Swift. And there's a great point that Rich Rebar, our buddy Rich, made on Twitter, and I was actually DMing him about this as well. But the offense that the Lions were running for the front half of the season, the first 10 weeks of the season, not sustainable whatsoever. You can't run an offense through a tight end and a running back the way they were. They needed someone to step up, and Amon-Ra St. Brown stepped up, and he was that guy for them. What more could you possibly ask for from a rookie wide receiver? It takes time for them to get acclimated. He got acclimated. He gave you a 30+% target share per game. We're not expecting that moving forward. And yes, when they add bodies to this team, obviously he's not going to be able to maintain a 30+% target share per game, but can he maintain a 20 to 25%? Sure. Yeah, he can. I mean, even if they draft a true X in this draft, like if they get like a Pickens or something like that, Amon-Ra St. Brown can still play a very, very reliable slot role for them. And I still think that he's someone that I would want on my dynasty roster. I think that the chance that they go out and draft someone in this draft, draft a wide receiver is probably fairly significantly high. I mean, like I'm talking like day 1, day 2 type capital. And if that's the case, then you can wait until after the draft and buy low on Amon-Ra St. Brown, because people are going to look at the DJ Chark move. They're going to look at what they did in the draft, and they're going to say, oh, there's now too many mouths to feed in this offense. But at the end of the day, there's a baseline that good wide receivers hit from a target share standpoint, from a volume standpoint, because they're good wide receivers. And we don't even know if DJ Chark is that good yet. Like we don't know for certain that DJ Chark can command, a 20+% target share. So I am still on the Amon-Ra St. Brown train. I know that, a lot of people aren't from the analytics community, mostly because of like draft capital and what he was as a prospect and stuff. But I'm still in on Amon-Ra St. Brown. I think he's a very, very good player.
Yeah, people should be. And there's a lot to tease apart here because there always is, especially right now. This is why football is king, by the way. It's 6 months until games, and all we have is brain cells popping, trying to understand everything that's happening in real time. While we're doing this show, JJ, I'm sure there's things that we're going to have to react to and absorb. First of all, you brought up Gabriel Davis also. And look, there is a way of playing fantasy football where you just manufacture as many 52-48 edges as you can and harvest, watch your portfolio grow. I like watching football. I like seeing how the numbers get put on the stat sheet and understanding to the best of my ability. So it's easy to say, well, Gabriel Davis's target share was this in year 1 and this in year 2, and no wide receiver that's had these have jumped up any higher than this. Or with Amon-Ra St. Brown, like you said, 3rd day pick, 93% of 3rd day picks never reproduce, whatever. You can get into all these numbers and you can play the percentages, but then you're leaving out all the context. Right. And with Amon-Ra St. Brown, there's very important context where Ben Johnson, which I think is a name a lot more people are going to get to know, JJ. Yeah. It's great. We're in the era of fantasy football when play callers are becoming as much of a household name as the players on the field, and they should be. And Amon-Ra St. Brown said his late season surge was due to Ben Johnson. Yeah, who may or may not be the play caller. Another thing people need to understand, context, is that Dan Campbell ushered Anthony Lynn out of the play caller role at some point in the second half of the season. And hey, it ends up Dan Campbell actually is a pretty good play caller. He may or may not be the play caller this year, but if you're looking at the Lions offense and projecting it going forward, like you said, the first 10 weeks, we're not even looking at that. We're looking at those weeks when Ben Johnson played a much larger role in the play calling. And I think Adam Harstad would nod very approvingly along when you say targets are a stat of merit.
Yeah.
And it's just that he got those targets means some. Dwayne McFarland, another like intimidatingly smart guy. I'm so intimidated. I can't say intimidating. She said this morning, hey, a lot of players have had a chance to get vacated targets or targets in an offense that is bereft of talent, and they haven't been able to do it. So we should pay attention when they do.
Yeah. And to that point, like, I build out projections. I've been doing it for years. Like, I understand how projections work. And, there is an argument to be made of the too many mouths to feed stance, but it's only from the standpoint of too many elite talents to feed, right? It's more so like if you have a team with Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, and just like you just throw like 80 good wide receivers and a great tight end on that team. Yeah, I mean, eventually, a guy like T. Higgins might see a 10% target share if there's enough good players on that team. But we're not talking about this like elite talent after elite talent on this Detroit Lions roster right now, or even on the Buffalo Bills roster right now. And so a good player like an Amon-Ra St. Brown will have some sort of baseline from a target share projection standpoint. And I think that, when we see players have these sort of outlier-ish type finishes or a chunk of a season that looks like, James Conner's another great example of that, right? Where James Conner, yes, he went nuts and he scored too many touchdowns last year. Sure. We know that it's unlikely that he's going to repeat that, but don't take that and overcorrect it. And don't take that and think that all of a sudden he's irrelevant because he's not going to score as many touchdowns, or Amon-Ra St. Brown's irrelevant because he's not going to see a 30% target share, especially when you compare it to the market and how the market is thinking. It's like, anyone who's hating on Amon-Ra St. Brown right now, no one is buying Amon-Ra St. Brown at a 30% target share per game. Like if that were the case, he'd be a top 10 wide receiver right now. No one's buying him at that point. And so I think that's what's important. The important context to keep in mind is that with this too many mouths to feed argument, good players will see a good baseline target share because they're good and they're getting open and teams want to get them the ball. It's the same thing when we do prospecting, Sig, where I'm looking at things through numbers. Whenever I'm prospecting, I have a model that I look at. And the reason why production does matter, especially a wide receiver, when converting from college to the NFL, is because production is a proxy of these players seeing volume and seeing work. And that tells us that they're talented because the team wants to get them the ball, because they're getting open, and it just makes sense. It's logical. It's the same thing if like a player is a punt or kick returner, in college, where a head coach wants to throw that guy back there because he's a playmaker. It tells us that he's good with the ball in his hands, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in college, they don't care about, they throw literally their best players out there on punt and kick returns because they want to create that electric play. So, I think a lot of times it's easy to look at these like very, very basic stats and think that they're more so they're just a result of someone being on a football field, but there's a lot more to them. And I think targets are the best example of that.
And what we need to be open to, sometimes I think the problem, JJ, is it's just boring to say, Amon-Ra St. Brown was outstanding in the last quarter of his rookie year, and the coaching staff has embraced him, so he's going to continue on that same trajectory. That people feel, because this fantasy space is getting kind of bloated, and that's okay. There's still a lot of great people doing great, emerging, vital work. But it's boring to say, well, Gabriel Davis, another example here. Okay, you're making your group of cohorts. And look, I like models. I like analytics. I like looking for meaning in data. But you should be comparing apples to apples. And is there another Apple that broke a single game playoff record at the end of their second season?
Right.
It's
the same thing with Amon-Ra St. Brown. How many rookie wide receivers have you seen have a stretch like that? And the answer is not many of them.
Oh, yeah. I think it was like a pace to catch 150, 160 balls over the last 6 games of the season. Yeah.
Right. It was absurd. And the same thing with Gabriel Davis. But I also think because of course, like I model a lot of this stuff, especially when I'm looking at prospects. Again, I'm looking at it through the lens of my model first and foremost. But I just published this late round prospect guide, and the whole thing is, if you want one general theme to it, it's have nuance, right? Like don't approach this stuff with some boxed in way of looking at things. Understand trends. That's fine. Understand that guys like Gabriel Davis might not hit at that high of a rate. But you also have to look at what the cost is and how people are actually viewing these guys and saying to yourself, okay, where Gabriel Davis is being drafted right now, or what his cost is from a trade value standpoint, look at who's around him, right?
Right.
And look at the actual ceiling that this player has versus those other players. Gabriel Davis is set up very, very, very well right now. And you can say we haven't seen a player like this really come through historically or at a very high rate, which I won't even disagree with. But at the same time, you also haven't seen a player in this situation or or do what he did, like you said, against Kansas City. Or, the other thing too, with a guy like Davis, we obviously want rational coaching, like you always preach. We want good, talented players to be on the field. We want good, talented players seeing the ball. But Gabriel Davis can only do so much to see snaps, right? He can only do so much to actually get onto the field. Once he's on the field, then yes, you can start to judge him and say, he's doing this right, he's doing this wrong, or just look at the data and say, he's being targeted at this rate, et cetera, et cetera. Gabriel Davis didn't start seeing high snap shares until the second half of last year. And when he did, he was balling out. He was playing very, very well. And so I think that you have to take all that into consideration with a guy like Davis, even though, yes, he has to break a mold in order to be something very, very relevant in fantasy football. But he's got the size, he's got the speed, he's got the athleticism, he's got the ability. And honestly, him coming out, his prospect profile, even from an analytical perspective, he had some interesting marks. He was an early declare wide receiver who went on day 3. And he came from a smaller school too. And if you look at a lot of smaller school, non-Power 5, early declare wideouts in recent history, you have some hits. You have Deontay Johnson, you have Devontae Adams. There's guys that have hit with this sort of like general archetype. And that's another reason why, by the way, to be a little bit bullish on Sky Moore. But it's one of those instances where let's not just like push Gabriel Davis's prospect profile aside because he was a day 3 pick. I think that Gabe Davis is in that Amon-Ra St. Brown bucket where, it's very easy for a numbers driven community like the fantasy football community is to be turned off by these guys. And I understand it. I understand the process and the way people are thinking about that, but I do think that nuance is necessary here, and that these players can be good. And that's important to look at.
Well, look, again, unpacking the stuff, and we go right to the big picture discussion, even though there's all kinds of micro stuff to talk about right now. Maybe we'll go to like the quick hitters so we can touch on a lot of different things that are happening. But these are important, vital topics. And, in case people don't know, we'll talk more about this later. Lateround.com for all your late round needs. As JJ goes where no fantasy analyst has gone before. But these big picture statements of purpose really help, again, as the fantasy space becomes so much more crowded. Like, well, what are you about? How are you different? Why should I care what you have to say? And it is nuance. And there's things to unpeel here. First of all, if living life the last 2 years hasn't taught you this, folks, things that have never happened before can happen.
Yeah.
Okay. Just because it has the past are not the bounds of the present and the future.
Right.
So immediately you're putting your imagination in back in the closet and not using it to help understand what might be coming next. Isn't that what we're always trying to do here in this little fortune teller amateur world that we're in, is what's coming next? And with Gabriel Davis, and again, this idea of saying players that got this target share or were drafted in this round, I'll give you a 4th round UCF wide receiver that turned out pretty well. Brandon Marshall. How about him? Yeah. And by the way, why did JJ and I know this so well? Because Gabriel Davis absolutely dunked on Pitt. I mean, if you wanted to put on the Gabriel Davis game to show you this is what this guy could be at his very best, it was against Pitt. Maybe we can get Kenny Pickett in Pittsburgh. We'll see. I love that, by the way. Can Kenny Pickett play in Pittsburgh with 8.5-inch hands? I don't know. How could we possibly go about answering that question?
Right.
So, with Gabriel Davis, and then if you start doing things where you say like his draft capital or his target share in his first 2 years, well, how many of those wide receivers played with a quarterback like Josh Allen? Mm-hmm. How many of those wide receivers had the competition for targets like he has had? How many of those wide receivers, and this is so important, show that chemistry? It's the chemistry, baby. It's the way that, especially after the play breaks down, and you saw this in his rookie year, Gabriel Davis and Josh Allen like finishing each other's sentences. Right. Mm-hmm. Josh Allen's making an impossible throw, and Gabriel Davis is saying, I'm going to get in a position for Josh Allen to make an impossible throw because I know he can make it. And we're going to get a 30-yard gain on a tiptoe sideline catch that looked impossible whenever he let the ball go. So you're going to build on those things, and you're going to say, as soon as you put Gabe Davis in with all 4th-round wide receivers, well, you're putting him in with a bunch of guys that he doesn't belong with, or all guys who got 13% target share or whatever. You're losing that nuance. Those kinds of inquiries are good for questions to ask about players, but then you answer the question by digging in.
That's exactly what I try to preach all the time, is that, you simply, whenever you're trying to figure out a player and figure out if he's going to be good or not, the easiest way to approach it from a process standpoint is just to continuously ask questions. And then you'll find answers, and ask like high level questions first, and just keep asking why. Right. And when you get to a guy like Gabriel Davis, he already has a very interesting path and profile. Right. And so it's okay to sort of like go off that track. If you have a guy, I look at trends like you wouldn't believe. And if you have a guy who is going down a very, very traditional path, it's a lot easier to then say, okay, this guy's a buy, this guy's a sell, because we've seen this before so many times. We haven't really seen this that often with a guy like Gabriel Davis. We haven't seen this very often with a guy like Amon-Ra St. Brown. And so as a result of that, it's okay to still buy into that and buy into them and understand that there is an interesting ceiling. And again, it just goes back to this idea that like no one is buying these players, for like this absurd draft cost right now. Like it just, I think that part of like the way that we're talking about Gabriel Davis right now, people are like thinking in their minds that we're spending like a 2nd-round pick on this guy in a redraft format, or where that's not at all what we're saying. It's just that you're balancing the upside and the floor with these players, and you're balancing, and you're seeing that these guys could be maybe not league winners, but very, very beneficial for your fantasy team. And, the other thing I want to say with Gabriel Davis really quick is, there's an argument out there about, the fact that he couldn't take over that perimeter role when Emmanuel Sanders was healthy and playing for them, starting the season for them on the outside. But again, I think that if you're using that as a reason to not go after Davis, when we saw Davis take over that role down the stretch and perform very, very well, you're then buying into the idea of rational coaching. And in that case, you're saying coaches know better or knew better with Emmanuel Sanders versus Gabriel Davis early on in that season. And no matter what Gabriel Davis did down the stretch is irrelevant because the coaches knew that Emmanuel Sanders was better. And so if you're saying, oh, Emmanuel Sanders was better, that means Gabriel Davis. No, that's not how this works. Gabriel Davis is still a young player who came from a not a big program, who was an early declare, like I said. And so there's going to be some sort of learning curve. But then not only that, when he got on the field, he produced. And when he saw snaps, he produced. And that's very, very important to that equation.
Yeah. And you said to comparing to the market and who are the players around him. I mean, look, I haven't updated my underdog ADP, but the last time I did a few weeks ago, the wide receivers around him were guys like Hunter Renfrow, Darnell Mooney, Traylon Burks, Brandon Cooks. You're telling me it's absurd that Gabriel Davis, absolutely his outlook justifies a 5th, 6th round investment in early best ball drafts.
Yeah.
And Amon-Ra St. Brown is a 5th round pick. The guys around him, Chris Godwin. Well, that one's interesting now. Devontae Smith, Amari Cooper. We'll see about what happens with Amari Cooper. That's a good transition, actually, with Amari Cooper's ADP. How fast? I know you can run pretty fast with those quads, JJ. How fast are you running away from Amari Cooper?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's a scenario where I want to buy the dip or go against the grain and be a little contrarian and buy into that just because there's going to be a lot of people who want nothing to do with the situation, understandably so, justifiably so. But let's go back to what I was talking about earlier, where I think we should still consider Amari Cooper to be a good wide receiver. I mean, in hindsight too, my goodness, looking at what the Browns did and got, I mean, I understand it was a cap situation and a financial dump, but at the same time, you look at like what Jacksonville spent on like a Christian Kirk, and then what the Browns were able to do and getting Amari, and it just like makes more sense. It was just, in hindsight, it was ended up being a pretty good move for Cleveland. And so, I would say though, a good player will maintain, a guy like Amari Cooper from a projection standpoint is going to see at least 20% of the team's targets as long as he's healthy. And even in a run heavy offense, which we know is going to be a run heavy scheme, / we've seen / they don't even have the quarterback right now. I mean, maybe something changes, but they don't have the quarterback right now to really sustain, a high powered, a high pass offense or a lot of pass attempts in the offense. Despite that, Amari Cooper is still going to see 20, 22, 23% of the team's targets. He can still hit that triple digit target number. And so, if he falls enough, then yeah, he becomes somewhat of a value because I think he's still, he's still relatively young, at least in terms of like his age apex and stuff and such. I think he's fine. I wouldn't be shocked if if he does fall, if he does, get into like the true middle rounds of drafts, that I buy into him at least a little bit, just because we know that he's produced in the past. And we know that he's a good wide receiver. So that's really where I stand. I don't have like a super, super strong stance on Amari, but again, I try to, especially a wide receiver, follow talent above all else, because situation can morph. I mean, if they get Deshaun Watson, then all of a sudden Amari Cooper's a 3rd round pick, 4th round pick. And so, situation can change. And good wide receivers will see a decent target share.
Yeah. Like you said, if he starts falling to that 6th, 7th round range, then it's just a speculative pick. And there's also investment. And one thing you have in Cleveland is Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski have alignment. So you're not going to have one of those situations like Dave Gettleman or whatever.
Yeah.
Someone's buying the groceries and someone else is cooking. I think you've got alignment there. So I would expect that, yeah, they're going to get their money's worth out of that investment. Now, is Baker Mayfield just the value killer at outside receiver? We'll see, but again, that's the proposition. And you're right, it's not sexy. It's not this headline take to say, hey, if everybody starts backing off of Amari Cooper and he starts falling 2-3 rounds from his ADP, what's funny too is, so at this time of year, probably the easiest arbitrage you can collect is there's so many moves that are pretty predictable, but yet the market still doesn't move in terms of ADP or dynasty stock until the move is actually made. Amari Cooper getting released. Well, you could just look at his contract structure and his relationship with the team and say, he might not be long for the team. Back in January, as soon as they lost in the playoffs, right? But it still took folks, even Adam Schefter saying he's expected to be released. But sure enough, you still saw, because that's just adding this uncertainty. But like you said, there's positive uncertainty now with this Deshaun Watson possibility. And of course, what everybody else is thinking about is Baker Mayfield's psyche. How's Baker Mayfield doing right now?
I think Baker can handle it.
I
mean, maybe not on a football field. I think just mentally as a human being, he can handle it. If he, I'm certainly not in the camp that Baker is an answer right now.
Right.
So, that definitely exists. But the other thing with Cleveland too, I mean, would you be shocked if they end up getting Garrett Wilson in the first round of this draft?
Sure.
I mean, that's where he's been mocked to most. I think that they're still looking at getting, I mean, especially after releasing Jarvis Landry. I still think that we're looking at a scenario where they get another guy, especially, maybe on the outside, and they just utilize those like 2-3 tight end sets that they love utilizing because they, Njoku being there still. And, maybe they go that route. But, to your point about, sort of this arbitrage play and looking at what teams are likely to do with these players. You want to know another great example of that is Rondale Moore, where what do you like? What do people expect? Like we knew that this was likely going to happen, just given their situation and such. And then when Christian Kirk signs this deal, all of a sudden Twitter's like, "Oh, it's Rondale Moore season." It's like, well, did you like? We sort of knew this was coming,
right?
We knew this was going to happen, and it's fine if you like him or don't like Rondale Moore. I'm just saying that should have already been somewhat embedded into your priors, before all this happened.
Yeah, especially with Chase Edmonds in Miami now.
Yeah,
I think you could see more play that hybrid wide receiver running back role that they've been giving us a lot of tip-offs that they want him in that role anyway.
Yeah.
So the question with Rondale Moore is it was exciting. At first, it felt like we were getting freshman Purdue explosive Rondale Moore, but then the engine didn't really turn over for the rest of the year. And there were plenty of opportunities. Now, is that lack of imagination? The offense isn't going to get better this year.
Right.
So, I'm going to circle back to TJ Hawkinson and something you said, because on one hand, people like to be contrarians when we get excited and project an upward trajectory for a player. But then there are players like TJ Hawkinson, and maybe Rondale Moore is going to be one of these players too, where we make excuses for them, and we keep making excuses, and we keep making excuses until we're holding the bag when everybody else finally snaps out of it and says, well, maybe TJ Hawkinson just isn't going to be that guy. Like maybe Dalton Schultz really is worth more than TJ Hawkinson objectively in a dynasty league right now, even as difficult as it is to absorb that, right? And digest that, because you look at opportunity. The thing with TJ Hawkinson is he's been set up for big opportunity from day one, and something always intervenes. Injuries, or he just barely doesn't make the play, or now it's Amon-Ra St. Brown's turn to shine after he gets hurt, and you bring in DJ Chark. So we'll see about Rondale Moore. And our man James Conner, Pitt getting paid, and they bring back Zach Ertz. And the other thing that I see, just as a quick aside while we're talking about the Cardinals, and I think Ertz said winning a Super Bowl was one of his main priorities, which is like, okay, well, you have more confidence in Kingsbury than I do. But I feel like DeAndre Hopkins is going to go back to his 160 targets share when we start putting all the pieces together here.
Yeah, a guy that's going to be easier to buy and redraft than Dynasty, I think, because we've seen that archetype at least, like, sort of crash and burn, but I don't think Hopkins is necessarily there, especially because it was more injury related and not just like, he's terrible. And so, yeah, I'm with you. Like, I think he's going to walk into a ton of volume, and that's obviously pretty valuable. And he burned a lot of people last year, so naturally people aren't going to want to go back to that this season. So yeah, I'm with you with Hopkins. He's someone that I would not be investing in Dynasty, but would very, very easily invest in from a redraft perspective this year.
And he didn't burn people last year because he didn't play as well as he usually plays. He was still outstanding. He was highly efficient. I don't know what efficiency metric you would look at, but I would guess that on a per target basis, he was much more efficient than he was in the high volume role. Skill's still there. And unlike some other receivers, and why I think actually the ride down in dynasty leagues might not be as bumpy as folks are bracing for, he's not a wide receiver whose game is predicated on his physical advantages.
Yeah, it's not Dez, right? It's not a Dez situation. Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, he's a finesse guy, and honestly, he's a player that could go that Larry Fitzgerald route too, and move to the slot later on in his career and be valuable there. Yeah, I totally agree with you there.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see that NFC West. AFC West and NFC West. That's where the action is. Russell Wilson, Denver Bronco. React to me.
Yeah, I mean, like, I feel like it's one of those things where people are like, well, what happens to Broncos? Well, they all get better, guys, because Russell Wilson now. He's really good at football. So yeah, I mean, Alberto gets probably the most interesting boost with Noah Fant no longer there. And he hasn't really risen, it seems like, at least right now. He hasn't risen to the point where I thought he necessarily would. The one interesting thing with Alberto is I did a tight end breakout study this last couple of years. I kind of refresh it every year. But one of the things with tight ends, and you've probably noticed this just by like when you draft tight ends in redraft leagues, but one of the things that's very glaring and obvious is that middle round tight ends, I'm talking like after round 5 and then until like round 10 or so, they suck generally. Like they're bad bets. You either need to get a guy early or just wait forever, which is basically, you and I have played in so many leagues together over the years. And it's always like, you're always the guy getting tight ends early. I'm always the guy just like waiting forever on tight end. And I get them early sometimes too, but the middle round tight end guys are just generally really, really bad bets. Except the one thing that I found is that when the middle round tight end is the first pass catcher that's drafted on his team. So, Darren Waller's breakout's a good example of that, where, I guess the year after his breakout, but it was the year where he went really, really nuts. He was the top Raiders pass catcher drafted. And so, you might see, last year was very, very close between like Dallas Goedert and Devontae Smith, but you're not going to see that with Denver. You're going to see both Cortland Sutton and Jerry Jeudy drafted ahead of Alberto. So if Alberto does sneak into those middle rounds, it's just from a trend standpoint, a little bit rougher. And then you obviously, layer in I don't like the notion of like this quarterback didn't utilize this position or didn't throw to this position very frequently. You got to put personnel in there. You got to look at the content. Jimmy Graham was fine when Russell Wilson was his quarterback. It's just that Russell Wilson has not had a reliable tight end. And, we don't really know if Alberto is going to be that reliable tight end or not. So I'm hoping that he's still like a low end tight end 1, high end tight end 2. Maybe you can get him in the double digit rounds still. I'm hoping that's the case for Alberto to be able to buy into, but he's probably the most like intriguing, like shifter, Cortland Sutton, who's very talented, can play the perimeter, can get those 50-50 balls. He's clearly to me, someone who's going to benefit greatly from Russell Wilson and his deep ball, I think. But at the same time, I think that in turn, a lot of people already recognize that and know that. And then they might just say, oh, it's going to be a Sutton win, not necessarily as big of a Jeudy win, but Jeudy can run the route tree, the full route tree as well. And he gets a W as well. It's one of those things where everyone in that team just gets better because they got a very, very good quarterback in Russell Wilson. And then on the flip side, guy like Metcalf, guy like Tyler Lockett, it's just a big loss. I'm still a believer that like a guy like Metcalf especially can still produce. Lockett's someone who really relied on those big plays, someone who's going to be more of a timing route player, wide receiver, as opposed to what Metcalf does. And we saw Metcalf at least blow ups at times with Geno Smith, and he didn't necessarily, he had decent enough splits without Russell Wilson last year. I think Lockett's the guy who takes probably the bigger hit of the two, just because he's not that alpha, and we know that he's more finesse and needs that timing, and that the deep ball stuff is really, really big for him. He relies on that a lot more than most wide receivers in the league. So that's why it's a pretty big drop for a guy like Lockett. Hopefully, cross our fingers, they either get a good quarterback somehow, some way. I don't know if that's going to happen, or they just completely blow this thing up and they move those guys
with a 70-year-old head coach.
It's amazing that he's the one who's made it.
He's the one who might be doing the rebuilding, and they're not being mentioned in connection with Deshaun Watson after Dan Jeremiah said that he's hearing last week that that's where he was going to end up. So now maybe Malik Willis at number 9, but that's not good either.
No,
that's going to signal what kind of makes sense based on what the past is with Carroll, a run heavy offense. So yeah, it's bad. We'll see if Lockett gets traded. I don't think Metcalf is going to get traded. I like making the connection between Metcalf and Sutton. I'll mention KJ Hamler. I feel like I have to mention KJ Hamler because he's the Lockett. He's the Lockett.
Yeah,
right.
That's a good point. Yeah.
And but the most important bottom line, like you said, JJ, is every target in that offense is more valuable. And I like pointing out that we've never seen Russell Wilson in an offense that embraces his talents.
Yeah.
So that's on Nathaniel Hackett. And we know that when Russell Wilson is hot, he's basically, if not the number one fantasy quarterback, right there with anybody. And what will it look like? Will they let him unleash him in a Tom Brady kind of way? Because you mentioned earlier, well, what about too many mouths to feed? Well, if you're making the too many mouths to feed argument, then you need to look at where those mouths are getting fed, intersecting at the quarterback position. And Denver's another offense where that qualifies, where if you feel like, oh, I don't know who to draft from Denver's passing game, the answer is Russell Wilson.
Yeah.
It's exciting. I mentioned Chase Edmonds earlier. I want to go back to Miami because, first of all, and tell me if I'm overreaching when I say this, does it seem to you like Mike McDaniel is the closest we're going to get to one of us being a head coach?
Yeah. Except, he's like, yes, for sure. Like that dude has played a lot of World of Warcraft, and he's definitely like he's definitely one of us. Yeah. But he's still like I still don't know. Like I feel like I don't know what he's about yet. You know, like I understand his like quirky personality and stuff. Like I get that, but I don't know what he's going to be like from a football standpoint. And I will say that the Chase Edmonds move sort of makes me question it even more, because he's coming from a tree, the Shanahan tree, where yes, they get a lot out of their running backs, but they also don't invest in the running back position, right? Like there was some investment made there to get a guy like Edmonds. And I hate to say this too, but I always despise when a new regime comes in and they get guys that they've faced, that they've played against. Right. And that's exactly what you're getting with McDaniel and Chase Edmonds having come from the NFC West. And this seems like there's a bias there. And I'm not even saying that it's a bad signing or that Chase Edmonds is not good. I'm saying this more from the perspective of like, I'm trying to like see if there's something different and unique that this guy is going to really do. And I just haven't seen it yet. I mean, he's been there for a month or whatever. I mean, so there's plenty of time for him to like prove that, but I don't know yet what he is going to be bringing to the table. And I'm just excited and anxious to see that.
Yeah. Well, whatever it is, it seems like it's going to be, again, in an openness or willingness to do things like what Brandon Staley was doing, what Dan Campbell was doing, for better or for worse. And Bill Belichick leading the way, who, by the way, does love to sign players that play well against him.
And yes, he does.
But Belichick, the GM, and Belichick, the head coach, are two different entities.
Yeah, I mean, and he's also made, a guy like Belichick has also made a lot of mistakes doing that.
Oh, so. Especially a wide receiver. That's the position that he needs to just swear off and let somebody else. They said that he's got other people in the room with him now. I can't remember. It's like two other people now that are like that are vetting his decisions.
Yeah.
So that's good. That's, again, like self-scouting. But you brought up a great point earlier with saying don't be too rigid about how quarterbacks distribute the ball to different positions. And I think that goes for play callers and offensive designs.
Oh, totally.
Because there might be play callers and offensive coordinators or offensive architects that are too rigid, but they go the way of the dodo. They go the way of like Chip Kelly. If you're too rigid, maybe you'll have short-term success, but you have to be able to evolve. Look at what the Chiefs did this year. Within the space of 1 year. That's usually the kind of change that takes years to really rewire an offense. They did it as a reaction to what defenses were doing to them. So I think with Mike McDaniel, like you said, it's kind of an unknown. And those first few data points, or even what we get out of OTAs and what we get out of training camp, is going to be really important because he does seem like he might be a different kind of chess player given free reign, not being checked by Kyle Shanahan. And that brings up, of course, I want to get a knee-jerk reaction, even though this stuff's kind of worthless for fantasy, but it's still fun. Like week 13 of the season, who's starting at quarterback for Miami?
I think it's Tua. I think he can
still,
get a lot of,
yeah,
and I think that they're putting pieces around Tua that, or hopefully they continue to, that allow him to thrive. I mean, that's why I love the Jalen Waddle pick last year for them, is because he creates separation. You need guys who can create separation for a player like Tua. He's not going to throw in tight windows. He's not going to that's why like a guy like Devontae Parker didn't work very well, or hasn't worked very well with Tua, but a guy like Waddle does, because Waddle can separate so well. And so I think that he's going to be able to get the most out of Tua. I just, I just want to see like how much carryover there really is from these past offenses. And, from a fantasy standpoint, the big thing is the running back position with this scheme and with this mentality, right? And I don't think that they're done with Chase Edmonds. I would expect them to maybe this signals that they're not going to get a guy early, but we also don't see Shanahan off or a Shanahan tree go after running backs early that frequently. We did see Trey Sermon last year and saw how that worked out, but that's to me, I'm interested to see if they get a true complement for Edmonds, because right now on that roster they just have a lot of undersized sort of guys who can accelerate and are quick, like an Edmonds and even like a Savon Ahmed to some degree, like he's that sort of archetype. But are they going to get more of an early down bruiser in this class? And you could point to there are some guys you could get day 3 in this class, like a Hassan Haskins or something like that, that's bigger bodied, and you can get the goal line work with him and etc. But I was mostly thinking that they were going to try to like duplicate an Elijah Mitchell situation, and like Pierre Strong was someone who comped really well to Elijah Mitchell in my model. And so even like a Ty Chandler from UNC was someone who sort of is in that same boat and same archetype. But now I'm thinking, since they got Edmonds, they might go after more of a bruiser and an early down guy. And there's some of them out there. There's just not, there's just a lot of like scat back kind of like, high 190s, low 200s, like smaller backs in this class who can catch passes out of the backfield. But that's what Chase Edmonds is, right? So it'll be interesting to see how they tackle the position.
Yeah, maybe they'll go in on Darrell Williams. Who knows? Yeah. Is there any truth to the rumor that while we've been recording this, the Jaguars have signed you to play safety?
To me to play safety?
I'm really just kind of being cute and cheeky about the Jags. I got
$15 million a year from that.
Right, right. What do you think watching what transpired yesterday around the Jags roster?
I don't think they have any idea what they're doing. I don't understand the Christian Kirk. Okay, so let's say this. I don't mind the Christian Kirk signing in theory. The issue I have with it is then overlapping that with the Evan Ingram signing, right? Which was not only like I don't know. It's number one. It's very clear that Laviska Shenault is not an answer for them, right? It's very, very, very clear. He was playing the slot and he can play the slot. That's probably where he's going to be best at in the NFL, but he just hasn't been effective there. And then they go out and they get Christian Kirk, who has played a lot better in the slot than the perimeter in the NFL, but he can play the perimeter. He can stretch the field. To me, they still need an alpha there. And yet they're paying Christian Kirk in that manner. Right. And then they go and get Evan Ingram, who is a redundant piece to Dan Arnold. Right. And then they get Zay Jones at this insane price point where, Zay's fine, but there's, he's a relatively replacement level wide receiver. Especially when you see like it juxtaposed against what DJ Chark just signed for in Detroit. It's like, what in the world is going on here with Jacksonville? So yeah, I mean, there was just a lot of question marks. I think a lot of people jump the gun a lot with contracts because guaranteed money is really all that matters. And we, whenever it first gets reported, we just see the full length of the contract, but guaranteed money is what really matters. But at the end of the day, sort of what the guaranteed money looks like with these contracts whenever they first announce them and report on them. It's very, very difficult to back what they're doing right now, especially just financially. Like, I don't mind Christian Kirk. I think he's fine, but he's more of a 2-3 type on a team. And then again, the Evan Ingram thing, Evan Ingram should be like a Mike Gesicki, and it just doesn't seem like they're going to be able to really do that in this position in Jacksonville.
No. And the Kirk signing, the Ingram signing, I mean, this also affects comp pick formula stuff, which is important when you're a rebuilding team. The Ingram signing really doesn't make any sense. I suppose the takeaway for all of us, JJ, is you got to end those bad relationships instead of letting them linger, because nobody understood why Trent Baalke was still the GM. Byron Leftwich, who had this perfect storybook situation to return to Jacksonville and lead the team back to glory, and he said, no thanks if that guy is going to be the GM. And now
big win.
We all see why.
Big win for Byron so far.
Yeah, now of course Tom Brady's back too. So wow, how things change. So how things change. You were mentioning the prospects. I'm really behind on my Bloom 100. preparation, so don't ask me any question about prospects, but you're very fluent in prospects. And speaking of things changing, since last we saw you, now there's lateround.com, which is great. I love that you officially have that spot in the metaverse or whatever we're going to call it now. You're the king of late round. We're going to get to that in the off the rail segment, but your late round prospect guide is out there. It's for sale right now for people that have an appetite to get something to dig their teeth into right now. But why should they buy it, JJ?
I mean, you got to be a degenerate if you want it. You know, my dad my dad bought it because he wanted to support his son, obviously. And then he was like, "Oh, your mom and I can go around our neighborhood and tell everyone about it if you want to. We have like 400 houses in our neighborhood." And I was like, no one cares about this. This is such a niche thing. And like, it's been great. You know, I've gotten great sales and like, there's people that are really supporting it and I'm so appreciative of it, but I understand that this is a niche thing. Like these are people who are diehards who are listening to On the Couch right now, you know, who are listening to the show. You guys, anyone listening to this, now or a week from now, you have an obsession with fantasy football. And that's what this guide is for. It's for you. It's really, you know, I peel back the curtain a little bit and show people what goes into my prospect model. You know, I built this model and sort of had a lot of iterations through the years, a lot of misses. I'm really transparent throughout the entire thing about my misses and why I missed and, why my model shifted after those misses. And, I talk about what the model sort of is working against and trying to beat. So the model itself is more predictive of first 3-year output for wide receivers and running backs than both draft capital and average draft position. So you're beating your opponents, right? Like it's tested to give you an edge, you know? And so I walk through all of that and then I profile every running back and wide receiver that was at the combine, and talk through their analytical profiles. And, you know, I approach all of this with a lot of nuance. I think it's important to have that nuance whenever you're analyzing this stuff because, you know, it's a very difficult thing to nail down. Like getting prospects right. There's a reason why teams draft Clyde Edwards-Helaire over Jonathan Taylor and Stephon Diggs drops to the 5th round. Right. I mean, you know, we see that happen because it's just a really, really hard thing to do. And so I'm open about that. I'm open to the fact that this is not the only way that you should be prospecting and that you should be listening to people who are watching film more than I am. You should listen to, you should have different approaches, but the way I sort of approach things is I have my model as like a baseline and I know, you know, what the model is telling me. And then I can sort of shift things from there and get my rankings and such from there. And so and then the other thing in this guide too, that I didn't mention, I have a year 2 model, which looks at how a player performed in year 1 in the NFL. And it combines that with his prospect profile score. And it gives you a year 2 score, which better predicts their years 2 and 3 than their year 1 points per game. If that makes, I know there's a mouthful.
Yeah.
So
it's not just simply like doing the weather where you say the weather's going to be the same as it was yesterday, which is 80% of the time correct.
Right. So, and I created this thing called journey comparables where I look at players in history who had a similar journey from year 1 to year 2 as the player at hand. So a guy like Elijah Mitchell, for instance, his journey comparables were Zach Stacy, Andre. It's not about like size or anything like that. It's literally about just where they were as prospects in score and where they are in year 2 model as score. And so it's Zach Stacy, Andre Ellington, and James Robinson are his 3 journey comparables. But he's yet another guy where it's just you have to have an open mind for, because, you know, we haven't seen a player like him really come out and do what he did. You know, we have some examples of it, but you know, it hopefully opens your eyes to my process, the things that I look for, the things that have helped me. And hopefully, you know, you get a little bit of juice for your own fantasy teams and finding the right guys, finding the right prospects, and finding the right year 2 guys as well that can help your fantasy team.
Yeah, I of course always think of Matt Waldman in the RSP, but when you show your process, you teach a lot more than just tell me what to do. Real quick before we go off the rails, I just want to the first player that pops in your head when I ask you these questions. Okay, who is a player that you ended up being a lot higher on than you expected to be after you put the prospect guide together?
Kenneth Walker, probably.
Okay.
Because, and I say that because his receiving numbers are so not good. And that's a big input and gets a lot of signal in my model. Analytically, receiving numbers matter a lot at the running back position. But there's a lot of good to his profile outside of that. He went from like an RB3 for me because I had Spiller ahead of him. He's my RB2 now. I can't back Spiller with the way that things are trending for him right now.
All right. So it's lateround.com. We're for folks that don't know about the launch of lateround.com and JJ setting up shop. So the last 10 minutes off the rails is going to be late round themed. All right. And this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to give you a category of something, and you're going to tell me your favorite late round version of that. Okay. So, we're talking underrated. We're talking, you made your name as late round quarterback. It's like, the best late round chain restaurant would be like, I don't know. They don't even have Chi-Chi's in the United States.
Oh, Chi-Chi's.
I know, right?
In Pittsburgh, especially, man.
Right. Fried ice cream.
Yeah.
It is reality. So something like that, right? Because it's like Chi-Chi's would be like the late round chain restaurant, right? They still have Chi-Chi's like in the Middle East, I think. And you can still buy Chi-Chi's products. It's between two Yinzers. Yeah, right. It's okay. So I hope we get this right. Like, favorite late round band that you were into in your childhood?
Oh man. I can't even think of one off the top of my head.
Well, what was your early round band that you were into?
I don't know. I was very into like, I mean, this is going to be shocking to people. I feel like I was really into like rap and hip hop growing up.
Yeah.
And like not, cause I grew up in the 90s. So like, it was like the peak of that stuff. So I loved like one of the biggest influences on me musically was probably like Run DMC.
Okay.
Like I just was like obsessed with Run DMC, Beastie Boys, love the Beastie Boys. And then I got into like Tupac and Biggie, obviously.
Right.
Warren G was one of my favorites too.
Oh yeah.
Regulate is probably the greatest song of all time. Maybe that would be my like late round ish if we're not going band. But yeah, man, I just listened to a lot of like rap and hip hop stuff. That's why
yeah.
Couldn't go the band route there.
My story is always that we would watch MTV Raps on Friday night, and on Saturday we would go to the mall to National Record Mart and get whatever was on new MTV Raps and just expand our universe that way.
Yeah.
Have you seen the Ricky Powell documentary, The Individualist?
No, I have not.
Oh, you've got it.
Awesome.
As a Beastie Boy, it's in your DNA. You got to see it. It's sad. It's actually really sad, but it's a wonderful tribute to Ricky Powell.
I've been watching the Kanye documentary, which I was
comment.
I literally like I was so close to being like, I can't do this, right? Just because like him and just everything, right? But it's pretty interesting. There's a lot of crazy stuff in there because Kanye was another guy back in like the early 2000s. Like again, I was in high school, college in the 2000s, the early 2000s. And like he was massive then. I mean, like that was like the thing. And so like seeing that, come to life was very, very interesting. And then you see all the other stuff, and it's just like, all right, I don't need to see what happened after all that.
Yeah, no, it's Kanye. I mean, in some way we talk about Kanye, we talk about America. I really want to talk more about Chi-Chi's. When we would go to Chi-Chi's, we'd always pick whose birthday it was. It was always going to be someone's birthday.
Oh yeah, you got to have a birthday at Chi-Chi's, man.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if your birthday is for like 9 months, and sometimes we wouldn't tell the person whose birthday it was going to be. Favorite late round film?
Oh, The Prestige.
Oh, good one.
Yeah,
good one.
I'm a really big Christopher Nolan fan, and it's probably his like most underrated film, I feel like.
Yeah, and it's a definitely because exactly the underrated film, Christopher Nolan, and it's that's a fantastic call. Late round author.
Oh man.
Or even just be like a thought leader,
Yeah, that's the thing. I got really into like self-help stuff.
Okay.
And that's been like my adult life is more that, and like I've gone down like the Tim Ferriss route and stuff. And I say this like genuine, like totally serious. The 4-hour work week is the reason that I started doing fantasy football stuff.
Wow.
Yeah. Like that book completely changed my life. Like
wow.
It wasn't even like I literally got like 3/4 of the way through in that book and I stopped reading it because I knew what I wanted to do. Like it was that sort of like epiphany kind of moment. Yeah, that's probably. I guess I'd have to go with that answer just because it was so important.
And that's an early round pick, but sometimes the early round pick is the right pick. You know, you take the stud, you take Tim Ferriss, definitely revolutionary. Late round vacation spot.
Asheville, North Carolina.
Ooh,
yeah.
Mountains.
I mean, I'm
head for the mountains.
Yeah, I'm only 2.5 hours from there now, like 2 hours from there, and so we get to go up there, relatively often. But man, that place, late round, we're talking here. It's not like a go-to for a lot of people, but if you are able to get there, it is a really, really cool place.
It's got a lot of old like WPA architecture, right? Isn't the downtown really beautiful? And
it is
like a bygone era kind of.
Yes, and they have like drum circles on Fridays.
Yes,
and stuff. It's like super hippie and cool, and like it's just like such a good vibe there. I mean, you cannot not have a good time there.
Yeah, everybody I know that lives in Asheville and Boone are all happy people. Like they've reached some sort of nirvana. My only advice for folks traveling through the Appalachians is make sure you know when you're in a dry county.
Yeah.
Sure
yeah.
That's important.
Yeah.
Because you can end up in a dry county, and that can lead to, Okay, favorite late round Pittsburgh thing.
Oh man, the Strip District. Is that not? Because I feel like no one knows about the Strip District.
They know about like the Seattle Fish Market, whatever, Pike Place, but they don't know about the Strip District. Absolutely.
I was married there. I got married at St. Stanislaus Church right there in the Strip, like that gold one, and then our reception was at the Heinz History Center. So we were all right there in the Strip, like the whole.
That's wonderful.
The whole stretch of the Strip. The Strip District is amazing though. And I literally like I would my entire like wardrobe from when I was like 16 to 23 like came from the Strip District. It was all like those like $5 Steelers and Pirates and Penguins shirts they sell there. Yeah, I love the Strip.
Yeah, man. Pittsburgh's great. All those cities, all those older cities. I'm living in one here in New Orleans. They all have worlds within worlds within worlds. Like history layered on history. The place itself tells a story if you know just how to look at it. And Zari just said that the Steelers got James Daniels, so that's good.
There we go.
And we'll see about Mitchell Trubisky. Hey, I'm open. Solve for X being Mitchell Trubisky minus Matt Nagy equals X. I'm open to it. $7 million a year.
Yeah, that's the thing. I was ready for them to get I wanted them to get Marcus Mariota, and then I see the value, the numbers on Mitch Trubisky mostly just because like I saw them as like comparable, and why not just go for the cheaper guy? But Trubisky's contract was fine. I mean, I thought it was the right move.
Yeah, I think what it shows me, JJ, is that they're not in denial about where they're at as a franchise.
Yeah, right. Which is not what we've seen from the Steelers over the last 5 years.
No. And we're not in denial about all the wonderful, amazing things happening in the football world. Flowers are opening back up. It's springtime. The juices are flowing because there's so much to think about always year round. And of course, JJ Zachariason at lakeround.com for all of your football obsession needs. It's good to be back. The couch is back. Cecil and I are going to be probably doing some sort of free agency reaction show tomorrow. Thursday, we're back at noon. Remember, noon Eastern, Matt Waldman will be joining us, and we'll be reacting to more reactions and things happening. Thank you, folks, as always, for giving us the opportunity to go off on our 4-hour work week little dreams and jaunts. We couldn't do it without you, folks. So it's great to be back with you. And as always, stay classy.